All right, everybody, welcome back to George Orwell's Animal Farm. This is going to be Chapter 8, or Chapter VIII, and you need to follow along in your own book on page 98. Okay? All right, remember to follow along in your book and make whatever marks we asked you to make. Remember back in Chapter 7, we had some terrible things going on. We had the slaughter of a bunch of the farm animals. Napoleon ordered the dogs to attack and to kill these animals that had confessed to crimes that, and you know and I know that they probably didn't even commit these crimes, right? So why would that happen? Well, remember that Animal Farm is an allegory, and that's exactly, folks, exactly what happened in the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, remember at this time, Joseph Stalin is in charge, and that's one thing that Joseph Stalin did. To keep his people afraid and to keep the attention off of his terrible rule, he actually would force people in the Soviet Union to confess to crimes that they hadn't really committed and execute them or deport them to Siberia. And so you have to understand that just like it's happening on Animal Farm, once again, that's what's happening in the Soviet Union. Just like Napoleon, Stalin is forcing people in his country to confess to crimes they didn't commit, killing them and deporting them to a far, far off place called Siberia. And Siberia would be way, way up here, freezing, terrible, cold place to be. And with that, let's start a very gloomy chapter, Chapter 8 of Animal Farm. All right, here we go. A few days later, when the terror caused by the executions had died down, some of the animals remembered, or thought they remembered, that the sixth commandment decreed, good word there, we're going to mark that, decreed, no animal shall kill any other animal. Decreed is another word for saying said, right? But it's a better way of saying it. And though no one cared to mention it in the hearing of the pigs or the dogs, it was felt that the killings which had taken place did not square with this. Well, duh. Let me see if I can darken this up just a little bit. Hold up, folks. All right, there we go. So where were we? Didn't square with this. Clover asked Benjamin to read her the sixth commandment, and when Benjamin, as usual, said that he refused to meddle in such matters, she fetched Muriel. Muriel read the commandment for her. It ran, no animal shall kill any other animal without cause. Somehow or another, the last two words had slipped out of the animal's memory. But they saw now that the commandment had not been violated, for clearly there was good reason for killing the traitors, underline that word, the traitors who had leagued themselves with Snowball. Interesting. So we know what's going on here, don't we, folks? Who do you think changed this commandment so it said, no animal shall kill any other animal without cause? Any guesses? That's right, probably the pigs again. So Napoleon and the rest of the pigs are doing a very good job of covering their tracks. Makes you wonder what sort of changes in the Soviet Union Stalin made and slipped past his own people. Throughout the year, the animals worked even harder than they had worked in the previous year to rebuild the windmill with the walls twice as thick as before. Next page. And to finish it by the appointed date. Together with the regular work of the farm, which was a tremendous labor, there were times when it seemed to the animals that they worked longer hours and fed no better than they had done in Jones's day. On Sunday mornings, Squealer, holding down a long strip of paper with his trotter, would read out to them lists of figures proving that the production of every class of foodstuff had increased by 200%, 300%, or 500%, as the case might be. Interesting, I'm going to make a mark there. I know you've got a question on that. What type of propaganda is Squealer using to convince the animals that, things aren't that bad? Going on. The animals saw no reason to disbelieve him, especially as they could no longer remember very clearly what conditions had been like before the rebellion. All the same, there were days when they felt they would sooner have had less figures and more food. There you go. All the orders were now issued through Squealer, or one of the other pigs. Napoleon himself was not seen in public as often as once in a fortnight. When he did appear, he was attended not only by his retinue. Let's look up that word, folks. Retinue. What's that word? Retinue. Say it with me. Ready, go? Retinue. That's like his clan, or his boys, shall we say. He was attended not only by his retinue of dogs, but by a black cockerel who marched in front of him and acted as a kind of trumpeter, letting out a loud cock-a-doodle-doo before Napoleon spoke. Even in the farmhouse, it was said, Napoleon inhabited separate apartments from the others. He took his meals alone, with two dogs to wait upon him, and always ate from the Crown Derby dinner service, which had been in the glass cupboard in the drawing room. It was also announced that the gun would be fired every year on Napoleon's birthday, as well as on the other two anniversaries. Interesting. So we have Napoleon, who is withdrawing from the other folks, running the farm, but not really. When he shows up, he's got what? He's got his retinue of dogs to protect him, a black cockerel that announces his coming. But it sounds like he's becoming more and more withdrawn. And that's usually what happens with rulers like Stalin. The more powerful they become, the more they hide out and seem to take charge of their country through other individuals. And that's what's going on with Napoleon. Napoleon was now never spoken of simply as Napoleon. He was always referred to in formal style. So here we go. We've talked about formal language. Check this out. These are his titles. Formal style as, next page, as our leader, Comrade Napoleon. And the pigs like to invent for him such titles as Father of all animals, Terror of mankind, Protector of the sheepfold, Duckling's friend, and the like. In his speeches, Squealer would talk with the tears rolling down his cheeks of Napoleon's wisdom, the goodness of his heart, and the deep love he bore to all animals everywhere. Mark that. That's not one of your questions, but you can tell what type of propaganda is being used there. The appeal to emotion, right? All right. Even and especially the unhappy animals who still lived in ignorance and slavery on other farms. It had become usual to give Napoleon the credit for every successful achievement and every stroke of good fortune. You would often hear one hen remark to another, "Under the guidance of our leader, Comrade Napoleon, I have laid 5 eggs in 6 days." Or 2 cows, enjoying a drink at the pool, would exclaim, "Thanks to the leadership of Comrade Napoleon, how excellent this water tastes." The general feeling on the farm was well expressed in a poem entitled Comrade Napoleon, which was composed by Minimus, which ran as follows. So we've got a new character here. Minimus, who's kind of the poet. Ready? And this is the poem that he composed about our wonderful, and we know, terrible leader, Napoleon. Ready? Friend of the fatherless, fountain of happiness, lord of the swill bucket. Oh, how my soul is on fire when I gaze at thy calm and commanding eye, like the sun in the sky, Comrade Napoleon. Oh, something's going wrong with our camera here. Just a sec. All right, but here we go. Second stanza. Notice this is a pretty terrible poem, and I'm not doing much justice to make it sound pretty. Thou art the giver of all that thy creatures love, full belly twice a day, clean straw to roll upon. Every beast, great or small, sleeps at peace in his stall. Thou watchest over all, Comrade Napoleon. Had I a sucking pig, ere he had grown as big, even as a pint bottle or as a rolling pin, he should have learned to be faithful and true to thee. Yes, his first squeak should be, Comrade Napoleon. All right, what a lame poem, but you can tell what's going on here. Minimus is trying to further persuade the animals through another type of propaganda, which is, in this case, poetry, amusement, right? Here we go. Napoleon approved of this poem and caused it to be inscribed on the wall of the big barn at the opposite end from the 7 Commandments. It was surmounted by a portrait of Napoleon in profile, executed by Squealer in white paint. There you go, surmounted. Or mounted above, okay? There you go. Surmounted, good word, I'd mark that one. Meanwhile, through the agency of Whymper, Napoleon was engaged in complicated negotiations with Frederick and Pilkington. Now remember those 2 farms on either side, Frederick and Pilkington. The pile of timber was still unsold. Oh, snap, here we go. Enter the pile of timber, okay? There's going to be a little dispute, and we'll explain what that is in the Soviet Union in just a little bit, okay? Back up, sorry. Meanwhile, through the agency of Whymper, Napoleon was engaged in complicated negotiations with Frederick and Pilkington. The pile of timber was still unsold. Of the 2, Frederick was the more anxious to get hold of it, but he would not offer a reasonable price. And at the same time, there were renewed rumors that Frederick and his men were plotting to attack Animal Farm and to destroy the windmill, and the building of which had aroused furious jealousy in him. Snowball was known to still be skulking on Pinchfield Farm. In the middle of the summer, the animals were alarmed to hear that 3 hens had come forward and confessed that, inspired by Snowball, they had entered into a plot to murder Napoleon. More fake or forced confessions, right? They were executed immediately, and fresh precautions for Napoleon's safety were taken. 4 dogs guarded his bed at night, 1 at each corner, and a young pig named Pink Eye was given the task of tasting all the food before he ate it, lest it should be poison. Interesting. So we've got what? We still have Napoleon being used as a scapegoat. One more time. What's that word? Scapegoat. Sorry. That's Snowball being used as a scapegoat, and Napoleon is, as a result, oh, protect our Napoleon, Snowball's out to get him again. Interesting. What a quick way to divert more attention from the terrible job that Napoleon's doing. Next paragraph. At about the same time, it was given out that Napoleon had arranged to sell the pile of timber to Mr. Pilkington. He was also going to enter into regular agreement for the exchange of certain products between Animal Farm and Foxwood. The relations between Napoleon and Pilkington, though they were only conducted through Whymper, were now almost friendly. Interesting. The animals distrusted Pilkington as a human being, but greatly preferred him to Frederick, whom they both feared and hated. As the summer wore on, the windmill neared completion. The rumors of an impending treacherous attack grew stronger and stronger. Frederick, it was said, intended to bring against them 20 men, all armed with guns, and he had already bribed the magistrates and police, so that if he could once again get a hold of the title deeds of Animal Farm, they would ask no questions. Moreover, terrible stories were leaking out from Pinchfield about the cruelties that Frederick practiced upon his animals. They had flogged an old horse to death. He starved his cows. He had killed a dog by throwing it into the furnace. He amused himself in the evenings by making cocks fight with splinters of razor blade tied to their spurs. The animals' blood boiled with rage when they had heard of these things being done to their comrades, and sometimes they clamored to be allowed to go out in a body and attack Pinchfield Farm. Clamored. There you go. Making a lot of noise altogether, right? Clamored. What a great way of saying they come together and make a lot of noise. All right, so they're clamoring to get back at Pinchfield for all the terrible things they hear he's doing to his animals. To drive out the humans and set the animals free. But Squealer counseled them to avoid rash actions and trust in Comrade Napoleon's strategy. Another good word, rash. Like you don't think it through. So if they just rush over there and fight without planning it, that would be considered rash. Another good word. Nevertheless, feeling against Frederick continued to run high. One Sunday morning, Napoleon appeared in the barn and explained that he had never at any time contemplated selling the pile of timber to Frederick. He considered it beneath his dignity, he said, to have dealings with scoundrels of that description. The pigeons who were still sent out to spread tidings of the rebellion were forbidden to set foot anywhere in Foxwood, and were also ordered to drop their former slogan of "Death to Humanity" in favor of "Death to Frederick." Man, they hate this guy. In the late summer, yet another of Snowball's machinations was laid bare. Good word, machinations. Now you can see the word machine in there, or something that works. So in this case, you've got Snowball's machinations, or his designs, or his plans. Another word for plan or designs. Very cool. The wheat crop was full of weeds, and it was discovered that one of his nocturnal visits, Snowball had mixed weed seeds with the seed of corn. Now wait a second, that does not even make sense. We know Snowball's not around. But Napoleon's using him as a scapegoat once again and saying the weeds are due to what? Snowball scattering weeds all over. A gander who had been privy to the plot had confessed his guilt to Squealer and immediately committed suicide by swallowing deadly nightshade berries. So here's another mysterious death that we can't explain. But what they're going to do is the pigs are going to use it to make it look like Snowball's still on the farm somehow. The animals now also learned that Snowball had never, as many of them had believed hitherto, received the order of Animal Hero First Class. This was merely a legend which had been spread some time after the Battle of Cowshed by Snowball himself. So far from being decorated, he had been censored for showing cowardice in the battle. Once again, some of the animals heard this with a certain bewilderment, but Squealer was able to convince them that their memories had been at fault. In the autumn, by a tremendous exhausting effort, next page, for the harvest had to be gathered at almost the same time, the windmill was finished. Wow. Finally, windmill is done. The machinery had still to be installed, and Whymper was negotiating for the purchase of it, but the structure was completed. In the teeth of every difficulty, in spite of inexperience, of primitive implements, of bad luck, and of Snowball's treachery, all that made-up stuff that the pigs have invented, the work had been finished punctually to the very day. Tired out but proud, the animals walked round and round their masterpiece, which appeared even more beautiful in their eyes than when it had been built the first time. Moreover, the walls were twice as thick as before. Nothing short of explosives would lay them low this time. There you go, a little foreshadowing. Dun, dun, dun. Nothing could bring this down except for explosives. And when they thought of how they had labored, what discouragements they had overcome, and the enormous difference that would be made in their lives when the sails were turning and the dynamos running, when they thought of all this, their tiredness forsook them, and they gamboled round and round the windmill, uttering cries of triumph. Napoleon himself, attended by his dogs and his cockerel, came down to inspect the completed work. He personally congratulated the animals on their achievement and announced that the mill would be named Napoleon Mill. Oh, what a great name. 2 days later, the animals were called together for a special meeting in the barn. They were struck dumb with surprise when Napoleon announced that he had sold the pile of timber to Frederick. Tomorrow, Frederick's wagons would arrive and begin carting it away. Throughout the whole period of his seeming friendship with Pilkington, Napoleon had really been in secret agreement with Frederick. Now, what is going on here? You've got Animal Farm or Napoleon that's flip-flopping back and forth between those two characters. Do you remember them? I had pictures of them somewhere, but can't find them right now. Nope, here they are. Okay, so you have two groups that are wanting the wood. One is the farm on one side, and one is the farm on the other side. Remember those? Okay. So in this case, he said, well, I'm not going to sell it to Pinchfield. No way am I going to sell it to him. They get Frederick, from Pinchfield, but all of a sudden he's changed his mind and sold it to him. And that's exactly what happened in the Soviet Union. Upside down, of course. There you go. The Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union, Stalin said he hated Hitler. He said, there's no way I want to have anything to do with that guy. Let's kill him or let's keep him out of our country. And all, just hated him absolutely, positively, completely. And then not too long after that, Stalin and Hitler actually signed something called the Hitler-Stalin Pact, where they got all buddy-buddy and were like, yeah, let's be buddies, let's be friends. So when you see this flip-flopping with the wood sale, that's exactly what that's talking about. Is in the real story of the Soviet Union, Stalin did the same thing. He couldn't decide whether or not he was going to be buddy-buddy with Hitler or be terrified of him and make sure that he never stepped foot in his country. When it was all said and done, they formed the Hitler-Stalin Pact. All right, let's finish up here. I struck dumb, blah, 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 blah. Okay, next page. All relations with Foxwood had been broken off. Insulting messages had been sent to Pilkington, and the pigeons had been told to avoid Pinchfield Farm and to alter their slogan from Death to Frederick to Death to Pilkington. And at the same time, Napoleon assured the animals that the stories of the impending attack on Animal Farm were completely untrue, and that the tales about Frederick's cruelty to his own animals had been greatly exaggerated. Sorry, I lost the screen for a second. Where are we at? Greatly exaggerated. All these rumors had probably originated with Snowball and his agents. It now appeared that Snowball was not, after all, hiding on Pinchfield Farm. And in fact, he had never been there in his life. He was living in considerable luxury, so it was said, at Foxwood, and had in reality been a pensioner of Pilkington for the past. Pensioner. Someone who receives a pension, right? Or someone who's living off of somebody else. All right, well, that's as far as we're going to get. You need to finish the rest of it. And here's going to be the weird thing. Remember that Animal Farm is now in league with Frederick from Pinchfield Farm, right? There's no way they're going to invade, especially after that sale of the wood. Well, the problem is that in the Soviet Union, even after Hitler signed the pact with Joseph Stalin, remember that? He still ended up invading Russia. And so you can guess what's going to happen on Animal Farm, and you'll read about that as it comes up. So again, enjoy the rest of Chapter 8. You are right at the top, right in the middle of page 105.